Joining us, reporter with the New York Times, Ken Vogel. He broke this story. Joyce Vance is back with us as well. So, Ken, lay it out for us.
Yeah, as you mentioned there, Katie, there was this investigation that was opened into the sort of the circumstances behind the commutation, and it was shut down by political appointees in the Trump Justice Department. There was concern in the Trump Justice Department, that this might be like sort of sour grapes on behalf of the prosecutors, that they were looking to essentially find out why their hard work on this case had been wiped away by this commutation, or at least the sentence had, but then also concern about one of the people who came under scrutiny in this investigation, who is this priest who you mentioned in the teaser there. His name is Father Frank Mann. He's a retired priest in Brooklyn. He's close to the president. He actually delivered the closing benediction at the president's inauguration in last year, 2025. And we found out through our reporting that he had advocated for this commutation for David Gentile with President Trump. And the prosecutors were looking at his involvement, among other things. And this was part of the concern in the Justice Department, that there would be scrutiny of this guy, given his sort of religious affiliation, is what we had heard. But then you also have to wonder if maybe there was the potential here to embarrass President Trump by exposing the way that people close to him have used their connections to lobby for clemency for well-connected and wealthy individuals.
So Gentile, though, you tried to find him, you and the other reporters, Byland, on this, tried to find him, tried to get comment from him. He's been hard to get a hold of, but you were also able to talk to people who he spoke with, and he bragged about his ability to do this?
So, yeah, the priest, Father Mann, does, in fact, brag about his connection. I mean, he's boasted about his connections to President Trump in sermons and homilies that he's delivered at Mass at various churches at which he fills in Brooklyn. But then we also talked to a parishioner of his who spoke recently to him. After we reached out to the parishioner reached out to the priest and said, hey, what's going on? I got this call from the New York Times. They're asking about, like, your connection with Trump. And he said, he tells the parishioner that, in fact, yes, he advocated for clemency for someone. He didn't name the person to the parishioner, but he advocated for clemency to someone, and President Trump gave this commutation essentially at his recommendation. And that's quite different, that boast, than what he told us. The priest told us that he had nothing to do with the commutation. So there's a little discordance there. And I think, given our reporting, it's our conclusion that, in fact, he was quite involved in getting this commutation in front of Trump, and therefore that his denial of such directly to us was misleading at best.
So the White House has a statement in response to the investigation, the ended investigation. The White House says the questions about he did not address the Times' questions, your questions about the investigation, but said all applications for pardons or commutations are thoroughly vetted. The president himself, I think, also commented on this to you guys. He has in the past been fairly prickly about people making money off of him. What did he say?
Yeah, that's right. So we didn't hear from him directly, but we understand, a White House source tells us, that after we made these initial inquiries to the White House about Father Mann's role in this clemency and the possibility that people who worked on the clemency were, in fact, compensated for it, the president picked up the phone and called Father Mann and demanded to know whether he had been paid to advocate for this clemency. Father Mann denied that to him. However, we have other reporting that David Gentile had boasted to folks that there was some payment made to Father Mann in exchange for his work on this clemency effort.
All right, lots there. Joyce, what is the issue with granting somebody clemency like this?
Well, there's a fine line here between what's permitted and what isn't, because folks who are in federal prison hire people all the time and pay them money to try to get a pardon, or, as in this case, a commutation of sentence. For instance, criminal defendants will hire lawyers and pay them to argue for clemency. No problem with doing that. But what federal law prohibits is paying an elected public official, another public official, someone who's been selected for a position, paying them or giving them something of value in an effort to influence an official decision that they have to make. So that's likely what prosecutors in Brooklyn were looking at here, perhaps whether there was a conspiracy to try to do that. You know, we don't know the contours of the investigation, Katie, but we don't need to know the details to understand how shocking it is for someone in the Deputy Attorney General's office to call down to Brooklyn and to say, shut down your prosecution, especially when that case is getting very close to the Oval Office. That's what's so distasteful about this reporting.
Who normally gets clemency? What do you have to show to get clemency or to get a pardon?
Well, it's meant to be a process about doing justice and giving mercy. In the Obama administration, for instance, President Obama launched a program designed to guarantee that people who were convicted of offenses involving crack cocaine, but who, because their convictions occurred during this statutory period where they weren't permitted to take advantage of forgiveness and reduced sentences that applied to people who had been convicted later, he wanted to do justice. And so those cases were considered one by one to determine whether those defendants had behaved in a way during their time in custody that suggested that they deserved clemency. That gives you a sense of how the process works at its best. Of course, there have always been individual pardons that have come into question, whether or not defendants with access to powerful people or influence have tried to receive a pardon on their own behalf. And so that's always the balance that's struck here when you give a president absolute discretion. But there's nothing that I'm aware of that talks about this sort of outright pardons for sale sort of operation that's being hinted at here.